In a distant galaxy where the stars stretched endlessly across the dark sky, gladiatorial combat was more than just a sport. It was a way of life. The arenas were massive, filled with thousands of cheering spectators, all eager to watch blood spill. It was here that warriors fought for glory, wealth, and power. Some were born into it, while others were forced to fight to survive. Lady Solara, a powerful alien noblewoman, stood in the private box overlooking the grand arena. Her golden eyes scanned the fighters below as they prepared for their next battle. The anticipation in the air was thick with excitement. Solara had one particular fighter in mind. He wasn't like the others. He wasn't an alien warrior, feared for his size or strength. No, Solara had purchased a human, Jackson. The human was a mere slave, bought from the distant backwaters of Earth. He was tall, with dark brown hair and sharp eyes that had seen more suffering than anyone should endure. Lady Solara had bought him for one purpose, to use him in the arena. She had no interest in him as a person. He was nothing more than a weapon in her eyes. His purpose was to shed blood for her. Every victory he earned would bring her closer to greater power and status among the galaxy's elite. Solara was a woman of power, accustomed to getting what she wanted. She had many allies, but the true way to gain favor in the galaxy was through bloodshed. She knew the arena's rules well. Victory in the ring meant riches, fame, and influence. What better way to secure her place at the top than to win those things with a slave? A human would be seen as weak, insignificant by the alien warriors, but she knew better. Humans were resilient. Humans could endure. And this one would prove his worth. As the crowd's roars grew louder, Solara's thoughts focused on the human who stood at the ready. His hands were shackled, but his eyes held something different. She noticed it in the way he carried himself. Despite his chains, despite being nothing more than a tool for her gain, there was a fire in him that she had not expected. That fire was dangerous, and perhaps it was exactly what she needed. Jackson stood at the edge of the arena, looking out at the alien fighters who surrounded him. They were massive, their skin colors ranging from dark purple to bright orange, their eyes glowing with the excitement of the coming battle. They were strong, they were fierce, and they were ready to tear him apart. But Jackson was not afraid. He had fought in many battles before, though not of this kind. He had been forced into this life when his planet was conquered, his people enslaved. The galaxy was not a kind place for someone like him. And yet, he had survived. Jackson had learned long ago that in a world like this, survival came down to one thing: strength. It was not just about physical power. It was about endurance, intelligence, and the will to never give up. He was human, and in a universe filled with powerful aliens that made him weak in the eyes of many. But to Jackson, his humanity was not a curse. It was his greatest strength. Lady Solara's voice echoed in the grandstands as she spoke to her servants. Ensure he fights. If he falters, he will be punished. This is the price of his life. Her words were cold, calculating. She was used to being in control, used to bending others to her will. She had no time for compassion or kindness. She was here to make a statement, and Jackson was her means to that end. The human didn't matter. He was disposable. The gates of the arena opened, and Jackson stepped forward into the chaos. The crowd's cheers were deafening as the fighters roared, preparing for the clash. A massive alien creature, twice the size of a human, lumbered toward him. Its 4 arms were thick with muscle, and its jagged teeth glistened under the lights. It roared in anticipation, its battle cry echoing through the arena. Jackson tightened his grip on the dull weapon in his hand, a heavy, blunt axe that had seen better days. It wasn't much, but it was all he had. His eyes locked on his opponent. The beast was slow, but it was powerful. Jackson knew that if he didn't use his speed and agility, he would be crushed under its weight. As the beast charged, Jackson didn't hesitate. He dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the creature's massive claws. He moved quickly, his body honed from years of fighting for survival. The audience gasped as the human proved more nimble than they had ever imagined. Lady Silura watched, her lips curling into a slight smirk. The human was proving to be far more than she had expected. She was impressed, but she would not let it show. Jackson was just another pawn in her game. If he could win, she would benefit, but if he lost, it would mean nothing. She had already won. The fight raged on, with Jackson using every skill he had learned over the years. The beast was strong, but it was slow. Jackson's movements were fluid, calculated. He aimed for weak points, striking where it hurt most. The crowd, initially skeptical of the human, now watched in awe. They had underestimated him, and now they were witnessing something extraordinary. Jackson's sweat dripped down his face, his muscles burning from exertion, but he kept going. He wouldn't let himself fail, not for Lady Silura, not for anyone. He fought not just for survival, but for the hope that one day he would break free of this cycle. One day, he would no longer be a tool for others' gain. Finally, with a swift and calculated strike, Jackson drove the axe into the creature's chest. It let out a deafening roar before collapsing to the ground. The crowd went silent for a moment, and then the cheers erupted. Jackson stood victorious, his chest heaving, his body covered in sweat and blood. Lady Silura stood from her seat, her golden eyes flashing with approval. The human had done it. He had won. And now her plan was set in motion. She had bought a slave to shed blood for her, but what she hadn't expected was that Jackson would become far more than just a tool. He had proven that humans had a strength that could not be easily measured. And that strength, she realized, could be hers to command. Jackson stood in the center of the arena, the roar of the crowd still echoing in his ears. His body ached from the brutal fight he had just won. Blood dripped from the cut on his arm, and his breathing was ragged, but he had done it. He had won. The alien beast that had once towered over him was now lying motionless on the ground, defeated by his hand. But there was no time to rest. He could feel the eyes of the crowd on him, studying him, waiting for the next fight to begin. The gladiatorial arena was a place where one's life was always on the line, and Jackson knew that as long as he was forced to fight, he would never be truly free. He was a slave, bought and sold, with no say in his future. But right now, in this moment, he had proven something. Something that made the crowd take notice. Something that made Lady Silura, the one who had bought him, look at him in a way she never had before. He glanced up at her box. She was there, standing with a faint smile on her lips. Her golden eyes locked onto his, and for a brief moment, Jackson saw something he hadn't expected: respect. It was a fleeting look, but it was enough to make him wonder if she saw him as more than just a tool to be used. But he quickly pushed the thought aside. She was his master, and he was a slave. Nothing more, nothing less. The sound of footsteps brought him back to reality. A servant approached, holding a rag to wipe the blood from his face. Jackson didn't move, letting the servant do his work. He didn't care about the blood. He didn't care about the dirt. All he cared about was surviving the next fight. As long as he stayed alive, there was a chance, just a small one, that he might escape this life. The servant finished cleaning him off and stepped back, bowing low. Jackson didn't acknowledge him. Instead, he focused on the next fight, already forming a plan in his mind. He needed to stay sharp. The arena was full of dangers, not just from the alien opponents, but from the system that held him captive. He had to be ready. Another gate opened, and a new opponent emerged. This one was smaller than the previous beast, but no less dangerous. The creature was a humanoid alien, with green skin and glowing yellow eyes. Its muscles rippled beneath its skin as it stepped forward, drawing a long curved blade from its waist. The crowd began to chant, excited for the next battle. They'd wanted more blood. They'd wanted more violence. And they would get it. But Jackson wasn't just fighting for their entertainment anymore. He was fighting for his life. The creature circled him, its blade glinting in the sunlight. Jackson didn't move at first, studying his opponent, looking for weaknesses. He could feel the sweat running down his back, but he kept his focus. The creature was fast. Its strikes were sharp and precise, but Jackson was quicker. He knew he had to be. If he hesitated for even a second, the creature would strike, and there would be no coming back from it. The alien lunged at him, its blade aimed for his side. Jackson dodged to the side, narrowly avoiding the sharp edge. He rolled to his feet, quickly sizing up his opponent. The creature was fast, but it was also predictable. Jackson used that to his advantage, drawing his own weapon, a simple, rusty sword that had been given to him for this fight. With a swift movement, Jackson blocked a strike from the creature's blade and countered with a slash of his own. The alien barely had time to react before the sword cut across its arm, drawing blood. The crowd cheered, but Jackson didn't listen. He was focused entirely on the fight, on surviving. The creature hissed in pain and staggered back, its yellow eyes narrowing in anger. It was wounded, but still dangerous. Jackson could see the fury in its eyes. It wasn't going to go down without a fight. But Jackson had learned long ago that in the arena, it wasn't just about strength. It was about outsmarting your opponent, making them underestimate you, and using their own anger against them. The creature charged again, but this time, Jackson was ready. As the alien swung its blade, Jackson ducked low, sweeping its feet out from under it with a quick strike to its legs. The creature fell to the ground, momentarily stunned. Jackson didn't waste a second. He moved quickly, driving his sword into the creature's chest before it could recover. The crowd erupted into cheers once again, but Jackson barely heard them. He was breathing heavily, his muscles sore from the fight, but he knew this was far from over. He stood over the defeated alien, his heart pounding in his chest. Another victory. Another step closer to freedom. But Jackson knew the truth. There was no true freedom here. As long as Lady Solara owned him, as long as he was forced to fight for her amusement, he would never be free. He glanced up at her box again. She was watching him, her expression unreadable. Jackson couldn't tell if she was pleased with his performance, or if she was simply satisfied that he had done his job. But in that moment, something shifted. Jackson had proven himself, not just to the audience, but to Solara. He had shown her that he was more than just a slave. He was a fighter, and he would not be easily broken. But Lady Solara was not one to be swayed easily. She had bought him to fight, to win, and that was all she cared about. Jackson was just another pawn in her game. And yet, in the silence between them, he wondered if something had changed. Perhaps she saw him as more than just a tool. Perhaps she saw him as a person. But no matter what she thought of him, Jackson knew one thing for sure. He would never stop fighting. Not for her, not for the crowd, but for himself. For the chance to one day break free from this life and reclaim his own destiny. Jackson stood in the center of the arena, drenched in sweat, his chest heaving with exhaustion. The crowd's cheers rang in his ears, but he barely heard them. The only sound that mattered was his heartbeat, pounding in his chest. His last opponent had been fierce, but Jackson had outsmarted him, using his agility and quick thinking to secure a hard-fought victory. He glanced around the arena, his body aching from the brutal fights. It felt like a lifetime since he had first stepped into this place. The blood, the pain, the sweat. It had all become so familiar, but today was different. Today, something had changed. As Jackson wiped the blood from his face with the back of his hand, he caught a glimpse of Lady Solara in her private box. She was standing now, her golden eyes fixed on him, her expression unreadable. For the first time, he saw something new in her gaze, not the cold, calculating look of a master, but a flicker of something else. Was it respect? Intrigue? He couldn't be sure, but it was different from how she had looked at him before. Jackson had come to understand that the arena was not just about fighting. It was about making an impression. Winning wasn't enough. You had to do it in a way that made the crowd remember you. You had to fight with a purpose, with determination. You had to show that you were worthy of being noticed. And for the first time, he had done just that. The gates of the arena opened, and Jackson was ushered off the field. His body was sore, his muscles aching, but he kept his head high. He had earned his victory. He had proven himself, not just to the crowd, but to Lady Solara as well. As he made his way back to the holding area, his thoughts turned to her again. What did she want from him? What was her plan? She had bought him to fight. But now she was watching him differently. Jackson had no illusions about her. She was powerful, and she knew how to play the game. But there was something in her eyes today that made him wonder. Was she beginning to see him as more than just a tool? Or was it all part of her strategy to control him further? Jackson didn't know the answer. And right now, he didn't care. All he knew was that he had won, and in doing so, he had earned something he hadn't expected. His own place in this strange, violent world. For the first time, he felt like he was more than just a slave. He was a fighter, a survivor. As he entered the small, dimly lit room where he was kept between fights, Jackson collapsed onto the cold stone floor. His body was aching, but his mind was racing. He had beaten the odds. Again. But for what? Was it just another victory in a never-ending series of battles? Or had this one meant something more? The door to his cell opened, and a servant stepped inside, holding a tray of food. Jackson didn't look up. He was too tired to care. The servant placed the tray on the floor and stepped back, waiting for Jackson to take it. Jackson reached for the food, his fingers trembling slightly. He hadn't eaten much in the past few days, and his hunger was sharp, but his mind was elsewhere. He couldn't stop thinking about Lady Solara. What would happen now? Would she continue to use him as a pawn in her game, or was something changing between them? The servant remained silent, as servants always did. Jackson had learned to ignore them long ago. They were just another part of the system that kept him trapped in this world. But today, he didn't have the energy to pretend. He was tired of being a tool, of being used for someone else's gain. He wanted more. He wanted a way out of this life. Jackson took a bite of the food, but his mind was still on the arena, still on Lady Solara. What if she had seen something in him that no one else had? What if she was beginning to understand that he wasn't just a slave? What if she saw him as more than a tool for her own ambitions? As the hours passed, Jackson's thoughts grew more confused. He had fought for survival, for freedom, but now it seemed like there was something else at play. Something deeper. He had no answers, only questions. But one thing was clear. He could no longer view Lady Solara as just a cold, calculating noblewoman. She had seen his strength, his determination. She had witnessed his will to survive, and perhaps in some way, she was beginning to respect him for it. The next morning, Jackson was led back to the arena for another fight. The crowd was already gathering, the noise building in intensity. As he was led to the center of the arena, Jackson glanced up at the royal box. Lady Solara was there again, watching him intently. This time, her gaze held something different. It wasn't just approval, it was something more. Jackson felt a surge of confidence. He had already proven himself once, and now he had the chance to do it again. The thought of facing another opponent filled him with determination. He wasn't just fighting for his survival anymore. He was fighting for something else, something more important. He was fighting for the chance to change his fate. As the gate opened and his new opponent emerged, Jackson's focus sharpened. He was ready. This time, he wouldn't just fight to win. He would fight to show Lady Solara that he was more than a slave. He was a warrior, a man who could not be broken, no matter the odds. The battle began, but Jackson wasn't just fighting for the crowd's entertainment. He was fighting for something greater, the possibility of a future where he was in control of his own destiny. The day after his victory, Jackson's body ached like never before. His muscles burned with every movement, the memory of the arena still fresh in his mind. The crowd's cheers, the sound of his weapon cutting through the air. and the sharp thud of his opponent hitting the ground. They were all still with him, echoing in his mind. But now, as the sun rose high above the arena, Jackson knew that something had changed. He had fought hard, but the real challenge was not the battles in the arena. It was what came after. The question he had been asking himself for days remained unanswered. What did Lady Silura truly want from him? He knew that she had bought him to fight in the arena, but he had begun to suspect that there was more to it than just using him as a tool. The way she had looked at him after his victory, the way she had observed him with those curious golden eyes, it made him wonder. Jackson was led back to the holding room once again. It was a small, windowless space, dimly lit by a single flickering light. It was a place where slaves rested between battles, where they were kept out of sight until they were needed again. But Jackson didn't mind it anymore. He had grown used to the cold stone walls, the silence, and the loneliness. It was just another part of his life now. But that day, everything felt different. The usual routine was disrupted when the door to his room opened and a servant entered with a tray of food. It was the same as always: bread, some kind of meat, and water. But something about the way the servant was standing made Jackson pause. The man wasn't speaking, but there was something in his eyes that made Jackson uneasy. "Lady Silura has requested your presence," the servant said quietly, bowing his head. Jackson froze. Lady Silura had requested him. He had never been called to her directly before. She was always watching from the royal box, always distant, always in control. The thought of going to her now made his heart race. What did she want? Why had she asked for him? The servant didn't wait for a response. He simply gestured for Jackson to follow him. Jackson stood, his body stiff and sore from the previous fight. But he followed anyway. He had no choice. This was his life now, moving at the command of others, with no control over his own fate. As they walked through the hallways of the arena, Jackson couldn't help but notice the silence. The usual noise of cheering crowds, the clash of weapons, and the shouts of the trainers were all gone. Everything seemed quieter, as if the entire arena had been emptied of life. Even the servants who normally bustled about seemed to be keeping their distance. They arrived at a large door, ornate and decorated with intricate symbols. The servant knocked once before pushing the door open. Jackson stepped inside, his heart pounding in his chest. Lady Silura stood by a large window, looking out over the arena below. The sunlight caught her silver hair, making it shine like polished metal. She didn't turn to face him right away. Instead, she continued to gaze out, her expression distant. "You did well yesterday," she said, her voice soft, but carrying the weight of authority. "Your victory was impressive." Jackson remained silent, unsure of what to say. He had been in her presence many times before, but this felt different. This was the first time she had spoken to him like this, without the usual coldness, without the commanding tone. For a moment, it almost felt as if she was acknowledging him as something more than a tool. Lady Silura finally turned to face him. Her golden eyes locked onto his, and for a brief moment, Jackson saw something that took him by surprise. A flicker of something deeper in her gaze. It was respect. Not the kind of respect that came from power or control, but something more genuine. She wasn't just looking at him as a slave. She was looking at him as a warrior. "You have earned a reward," she said, stepping forward. "You have proven your worth in the arena, and because of that, I will offer you something in return." Jackson blinked, confused. A reward? He wasn't sure what to make of it. He had fought for his life in the arena, but he had never expected anything more than survival. "I know you may have thought that your life would always be controlled by others," Lady Silura continued, her voice steady. "But I see now that you are more than just a fighter. You have potential. You have strength." Jackson was silent, unsure of what to say. What did she mean by potential? What was she offering? Lady Silura took a step closer, her eyes never leaving his. "In the past, I bought slaves to fight for me, to shed blood in the arena. But you, she paused, her gaze softening. You have shown me that you are more than just a tool. You are a person. And because of that, I offer you this. She reached out, placing a hand on his shoulder. Jackson was caught off guard by the touch, but he didn't pull away. It was the first time she had ever touched him like this. I will free you, she said quietly. You will no longer be a slave. But in return, you must agree to fight alongside me, not as a servant, but as a partner. Jackson's eyes widened. Free. Her words hung in the air, each one weighing heavily on him. He had never imagined this. Never imagined that Lady Solara, the one who had bought him, would offer him freedom. It seemed impossible. But here she was, offering him a chance at something he had longed for, but never thought he would get. Why? Jackson finally asked, his voice hoarse. Why would you do this for me? Lady Solara's expression softened, and for the first time, Jackson saw a glimpse of something more than the cold, calculating woman he had come to know. Because you earned it, she said simply. And because in you, I see something worth fighting for. Jackson stood there, speechless, as the weight of her words settled in. For the first time, he realized that his fight had never been just for survival. It had been for something more. And now, it seemed as though he was being offered a chance to take control of his own fate. Jackson stood there, frozen, unable to believe what he had just heard. Lady Solara, the powerful noblewoman who had bought him as nothing more than a slave for the arena, was offering him freedom. He had fought for his life countless times, but this was different. He was no longer just a fighter, a tool for someone else's gain. She had offered him something he had never thought possible. A choice. Why would you do this? Jackson asked again, his voice filled with disbelief. Why would you set me free? Lady Solara didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to a nearby chair and sat down, her eyes still on him. There was no arrogance in her demeanor now. She wasn't commanding him, as she had always done before. She was simply waiting. I told you, she said finally, her voice soft. You have proven yourself. You are not just another slave to me. You are more than that. You've shown me your strength, your skill, and your will to survive. You've earned this chance. Jackson's mind raced. For so long, he had been a slave, bought and sold like an object, thrown into battle after battle, his life nothing more than a game for the wealthy and powerful. He had accepted his fate because there had been no other choice. But now, Lady Solara was giving him a choice. He could walk away from this life. He could be free. But it wasn't that simple, was it? Jackson had seen how the world worked. He knew that freedom wasn't something that came easily. It wasn't just about walking out of the arena and leaving everything behind. There would always be consequences. And even if he walked away from Lady Solara, there would be other forces, other powers, that would never let him go so easily. I can't just leave, Jackson said, his voice steady but uncertain. I don't know what's out there. I've been a slave my entire life. The outside world. It's a dangerous place. I can't just walk away from everything I've known. Lady Solara watched him closely, as if she was reading every thought that crossed his mind. I know it's not easy, she said, and I don't expect you to trust me completely. But I'm offering you something no one else would. A chance to make your own decisions, to live your own life, without chains holding you back. Her words hung in the air, heavy with the weight of their meaning. Jackson felt his heart race, his mind struggling to grasp the full impact of what she was offering. The possibility of freedom was something he had never imagined, let alone thought was within his reach. What do you want in return? Jackson asked, his voice cautious. He had learned long ago that nothing came without a price. There had to be a catch. Lady Solara's power was not something that could be easily thrown away. She didn't give things away for nothing. I want you to fight with me, she said simply, her voice firm. Not as a slave, not as a servant, but as an equal. Together, we can do more than we ever could apart. You are a warrior, Jackson. You know how to survive, how to win. I need that. I need you. Jackson's mind raced. Fight alongside her. The woman who had once owned him. The woman who had forced him to fight for her amusement. It felt impossible, but something in her words made him pause. She was asking him to be her partner, not her tool. That was a shift, a significant one. But could he trust her? Could he truly believe that this offer was genuine? Or was it another trick? Another way to keep him under her control? I don't know, Jackson said quietly. I don't know if I can trust you. I've been hurt too many times. People like you don't just change. People like me don't get chances like this. Lady Solara's expression softened. I can't change what you've been through, Jackson, but I can give you something different. I can give you a chance to decide for yourself. A chance to choose your own future. Jackson looked down at the floor, his mind spinning. He had never been given a choice before. Not a real one. His whole life had been about survival, about doing whatever it took to stay alive. But now he was being asked to step into the unknown, to take a chance on something new. For so long he had been trapped, bound by the expectations of others, forced to fight and suffer for the entertainment of those who saw him as nothing more than a tool. But here, now, was something different. Something he couldn't ignore. I don't know what's ahead, Jackson said finally, looking up at Lady Solara. But I'm willing to try. I'll fight with you. Not because you bought me, but because I believe in the chance you're offering. A small smile tugged at the corners of Lady Solara's lips, and for the first time, Jackson saw a genuine warmth in her expression. It wasn't the cold, calculating smile she had given him so many times before. This one was different. This one was real. Good, she said simply. Then let's begin. Jackson's heart pounded in his chest as he realized the gravity of what he had just agreed to. He was no longer a slave, no longer a pawn in someone else's game. For the first time, he was making his own choice, and that choice had the power to change everything. But as he stood there, staring at Lady Solara, he knew that their partnership was just the beginning. There would be challenges ahead, dangers they couldn't yet imagine. The world was never as simple as it seemed. But for the first time, Jackson felt hope. Hope that he could change his fate, that he could make a difference, and that he wasn't alone anymore. The days that followed were unlike anything Jackson had ever experienced. He had fought in the arena for so long that the idea of not being there seemed foreign to him. But now, everything had changed. He was no longer just a fighter, a pawn in Lady Solara's game. He had been given a chance to fight on his own terms, to make decisions for himself. But the weight of this new freedom was heavy. Jackson found it difficult to shake off the feeling of being trapped. It wasn't just the arena that had held him captive for so long. It was the past, the memories of everything he had endured that still haunted him. He couldn't forget the years of being sold and bought, the brutal battles he had fought in, the constant sense of being used. Could he really leave all of that behind? Could he trust Lady Solara, who had once owned him, to offer him a future that wasn't just another trap? He couldn't answer those questions just yet. What he could do was keep moving forward, step by step, and see where this new path would take him. Lady Solara, for her part, seemed determined to keep her promise. She spent hours with Jackson, talking to him about the world outside the arena, about the empire she had grown up in, and the struggles she faced as a noblewoman. It was strange for Jackson to see this side of her, the side that was vulnerable, unsure, and not just the cold, calculating figure he had known. One evening, as the sun began to set, casting an orange glow across the sky, Lady Solara invited Jackson into her private chambers. She had made dinner for them, a quiet, simple meal. The room was large and richly decorated, with soft fabrics draped over the furniture and intricate tapestries hanging from the walls. It felt different from the sterile, cold rooms Jackson had grown used to in the arena. There was warmth here, a sense of calm that made Jackson feel oddly at ease. "Please sit," Lady Solara said, gesturing to the table where the meal had been set. "I know it's not much, but I thought you might prefer something less formal." Jackson hesitated for a moment before sitting down. He wasn't sure what to expect. They had never shared a meal together before, and it felt strange, almost intimate. But the food smelled good, and his hunger had grown unbearable. So, without another thought, he picked up his utensils and began to eat. Lady Celera watched him quietly, her golden eyes filled with a mixture of curiosity and something else he couldn't quite place. When he looked up from his plate, she spoke. "There's something I haven't told you," she said softly. "Something about why I brought you here, why I bought you in the first place." Jackson paused, his fork halfway to his mouth. He set it down slowly, feeling the weight of her words. What was she about to say? "I didn't always live like this," she continued, her voice quieter now, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "I wasn't always a noblewoman with power and wealth. There was a time when I was just like you, a slave." Jackson's eyes widened in surprise. He had never imagined that Lady Celera, the powerful, untouchable noblewoman, could have ever been in a position like his. She had always seemed so far above him, so far removed from the struggles he had faced. But now she was telling him something he never expected to hear. "I was born on a distant planet, one that was conquered when I was young," she explained, her gaze distant as she relived the memories. "My family was taken, sold into slavery. I spent years under the rule of a cruel master, working in mines, doing back-breaking labor, until one day I was bought by a noblewoman from this empire. She took me in, trained me, and eventually I rose through the ranks. But that doesn't change what I was. A slave." Jackson listened in silence, trying to process what she was saying. He had always seen her as someone who had it all, someone who was in control. But now he realized she was speaking from a place of experience, a place of understanding. She knew what it was like to be trapped, to be at the mercy of others. "I know what it's like to feel powerless," she continued. "I know what it's like to have no control over your life, to be nothing more than a tool for someone else's gain. That's why I brought you here. Not just to fight, but to show you that there's more to life than survival. There's a way out of this. There's a way to change your fate." Jackson looked at her, his heart heavy with conflicting emotions. Could he trust her? Could he really believe that someone who had once been a slave, just like him, could offer him freedom? "I've seen what you can do, Jackson," Lady Celera said, her voice firm now. "You're not just a fighter. You're not just a slave. You have the strength to break free from this life, just as I did. I can help you, but only if you're willing to trust me." Jackson looked down at his plate, his thoughts swirling. He had always believed that his only way out was through violence, through fighting, through surviving. But Lady Celera was offering him something different. She was offering him a chance to escape that life, to live on his own terms. But could he take that chance? Could he leave the arena behind, leave everything he had known, and start a new life? It was terrifying, but for the first time in a long time, Jackson felt something he hadn't felt before. Hope. "Why are you helping me?" Jackson asked, his voice filled with doubt. "What do you want from me?" Lady Celera didn't hesitate. "I want nothing from you, Jackson. I just want to see you free. I want to give you the chance I never had, to make your own choices, to choose your own future." Jackson looked up at her, his eyes searching hers. For the first time, he saw the sincerity in her gaze. She wasn't trying to control him. She wasn't using him. She was offering him a real chance at freedom, something that had seemed impossible until now. "I'll trust you," Jackson said quietly, his voice steady. "I'll take the chance. But I don't know what's ahead." Lady Celera smiled, a rare, genuine smile. "Neither do I," she said softly. "But we'll find out together." And in that moment, Jackson realized that his life was no longer just about surviving. It was about living, about taking control of his future and choosing his own path. And maybe, just maybe, Lady Solara was the key to unlocking that future. The days passed, and for the first time in years, Jackson began to feel a sense of peace. Lady Solara had kept her promise. She was helping him find a new path. She taught him about the world outside the arena, about the different planets and cultures that made up the empire. She showed him how to navigate the complex world of politics, wealth, and power that had once seemed so distant. But more than that, she showed him that he wasn't just a tool to be used. He was a person. He had worth. Still, there was a nagging feeling in Jackson's chest. He had never been able to forget the life he had lived, the years spent fighting, the years spent as someone's property. The scars, both physical and emotional, were still there. He had never truly been free, and even now, he wasn't sure he could fully embrace the freedom Lady Solara was offering. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Jackson sat on the balcony of the large estate Lady Solara had given him a room in. The air was cool, and the stars were beginning to appear, their lights sparkling in the sky. For a moment, he simply stared at the vastness of the universe, the endless stars stretching far beyond what he could see. It was beautiful, and for the first time in a long time, he felt like he could breathe. He heard the door behind him open, and he turned to see Lady Solara standing there, her silver hair glowing in the soft light. She stepped out onto the balcony, walking slowly toward him. She didn't say anything at first, just stood beside him, looking out at the stars as well. "You've come a long way," Lady Solara said after a while, her voice soft. "From the fighter in the arena to the man standing here now. I never imagined you would get this far." Jackson looked at her, studying her face. She wasn't the same woman he had first met, cold, calculating, distant. She had changed, and so had he. "You gave me a chance," Jackson said quietly. "Chance I never thought I would get. I'm not sure I deserve it, but I'm trying to make the most of it." Lady Solara's eyes softened, and she placed a hand on his shoulder. "You do deserve it. You've earned every bit of it, and you're not the only one who's changed. I've learned a lot from you, Jackson. I used to see people as things, tools to be used and discarded. But you've shown me that there's more to life than power and control. You've reminded me that even in the darkest places, there's hope. And that's something I never thought I'd find." Jackson felt a surge of emotion he hadn't expected. It wasn't just gratitude. It was something deeper, something that had been building between them since the moment she had offered him freedom. He wasn't just fighting for survival anymore. He was fighting for something more meaningful, a future, a chance to make his own choices. But the fear was still there. The fear that this was all a dream, that he would wake up tomorrow and find himself back in the arena, forced to fight for his life once again. Lady Solara seemed to sense his unease. She turned to face him, her gaze steady. "You're afraid," she said softly, "afraid that this will all fall apart. But Jackson, freedom isn't something that's given to you. It's something you take for yourself. You've already taken the first step. Now it's up to you to decide what comes next." Jackson swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I want to believe that. I want to believe that I can take control of my life, that I'm not bound by the past. But it's hard. It's so hard to forget everything I've been through." "I know," Lady Solara said, her voice understanding. "It's not easy. But you've proven that you're stronger than the chains that held you, and you can choose to break free from them. You have the power to shape your own destiny now. No one can take that away from you." Jackson turned back to the stars, the weight of her words settling deep within him. For so long, he had been trapped in a cycle of survival, of fighting for a future that was always just out of reach. But now, he had a chance. A real chance. And it wasn't just Lady Solara offering it to him. It was his own strength, his own will to break free that had brought him to this point. He looked at her, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I've spent so long fighting for survival," he said, his voice steady. "But now I'm fighting for something more. I'm fighting for my own future. and I'm not going to let anyone take that from me." Lady Silara smiled back, a warm, proud smile. "I'm glad to hear that. You've come so far, Jackson. And whatever happens next, I'll be here. We'll face it together." The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment, there was nothing else. The past, the battles, the scars, they were all still a part of him, but they no longer defined him. He was more than his past. He was more than a slave. He was a man with a future. The night was calm, the stars shining brightly above, and for the first time in a long time, Jackson felt truly free. He didn't know what the future held, but he knew one thing for certain. He would face it on his own terms. The chains that had once held him were gone, and nothing, not even the past, could stop him now. He turned to Lady Silara, his eyes filled with determination. "Let's do this," he said, his voice resolute. "Let's take control of our own future." And together, they turned toward the future, ready to face whatever challenges lay ahead.